Hello everyone, my name is Yun Zhou and this is my topic presentation for CSCI 544A course. Today I'm going to talk about design patterns using jQuery, and I hope my presentation could be helpful for you to learn something about the jQuery. First part of my presentation is to introduce the background information about jQuery and design patterns. Okay, the first question you may ask, what is jQuery? jQuery is a fastest, more feature-rich, and cross-browser JavaScript library. It makes things like HTML document manipulation, event handling, animation much simpler for developers. In other words, it provides us an easier way to use JavaScript. And why we use jQuery and how it makes things easier for us to use JavaScript? First of all, we should know that jQuery at its core is a DOM manipulation library, and DOM is short for Document Object Model, and the DOM is a tree structure representation of all the elements of a web page. However, DOM manipulation using standard JavaScript could be pretty cumbersome. Fortunately, we have jQuery. jQuery comes with a bunch of DOM related methods and provides a nice abstraction around it. In doing so, this library uses a number of well-known design patterns itself. So you may ask, what is design pattern? A pattern is a reusable solution that can be applied to commonly occurring problems in software design. And the patterns are always templates for how we solve problems, which means that it can be used in quite a few different situations. And patterns are also proven solutions, which reflect the experience and insights of the developers who define and improve them. And at last, these patterns can be easily reused and expressive for communication. So that's why we have so many benefits to using the design pattern by using the jQuery core. And there are always three categories of design patterns. The first one is creational design pattern, which focus on handling object creation mechanism, where objects are created in a manner more suitable for the situation we are working on. And the second one is the behavioral design pattern, and this design pattern focuses on improving the communication between different objects in a system. And the third one is structural design pattern, and they are concerned with object composition and typically identify simpler way to realize relationships between different objects. And they help to ensure that when one part of a system changes, the entire structure of the system does not need to do the same thing. So here I list the design pattern, frequently used design pattern in the jQuery core in these three different categories. And I will going to cover most of them today. And now let's dive deep into the design pattern using jQuery. And the first one I would like to talk about is the lazy initialization. Lazy initialization is a design pattern which allows us to delay expensive processes. For example, the creation of objects. When we open a web page, we can find that there are so many items and images. So consider when we develop and design a web page, if we create every image, every items at the initial phases when the client opens this web page, it will take a long time to load it. Actually, we can delay some initialization of some images or items at the very end of this web page. We only need to initialize them when the client scrolls to the end of this web page. And the lazy initialization using jQuery is by using the ready function. Ready function, they can ensure that the main body of the code in the ready function will only attempt to execute when the DOM is ready. So the benefit using this design pattern is that it could speed up access to a site and to reduce bandwidth usage. But there are also some disadvantages you could not ignore. The first one is that it needs careful setting a flag to test whether the summon object is ready for use. Otherwise, may cause some race condition if there are multi-stressings. And moreover, this pattern will only work effectively if large objects are not loaded initially, and they may not be used in the near future. And the second design pattern we want to looking at is the adapter pattern. The adapter pattern is a pattern which translates an interface for a class into an interface compatible with a specific system. From this figure below, we can see that an adapter is a device that used to connect two pieces of equipment that are not designed to be connected at the first beginning. And the adapter is an existing interface that needs adapting. Adapter basically allows these two things to work together, which they are not initially due to their incompatible interfaces. And the adapter pattern using the jQuery is by using the CSS function. And the CSS function help normalize the interfaces to how styles can be applied between a number of different browsers. And here are a lot of good examples of it, and we are going to talk about the opacity today. And first, we consider that we want to open a website by using IE browsers. However, the existing CSS field in the CSS field may designed for clone on some other browsers, which is incompatible for the IE browsers. Now the client want to open this browser and send a request by calling a method on the adapter instance using the client interface, and the adapter passes this image to the adaptee and calls the CSS method to utilize the CSS file and override some settings and override some attributes in this field. So in this way, the CSS method can help us to adapt to a different browser request to the existing CSS file in our development. So here is a concrete example about how CSS works across browsers. At first, we define a rectangle whose default color is black. Here it is, the black color is black. And we also set opacity 0.5 for this rectangle. And we use fading function to change the opacity to 0.5. And it works pretty good for Chrome and some other browsers. And the opacity of this rectangle has changed, and the text underneath the div appeared when the opacity changed. But it meets problem when we turn to IE7 and IE8. The rectangle remains the same default color, which is a black rectangle, and there is no text on it. So it means the opacity does not successfully be modified. And to solve this problem, we need to the only thing we need to do is to add one more line of code with CSS functions by defining the opacity by using this syntax. So by reapplying this opacity prior to performing the fading, it now works across all browsers. So the advantage of using this adapter, firstly, it links two incompatible interfaces which could otherwise have to remain independently. And secondly, it can be used to create a shell around an existing block of code, such as a class, without affecting its core functionality. This makes the code reusable. We can adapt the shell to include additional functionality or modify the existing code if it's needed. And also, there are some disadvantages. For example, there is a performance cost in using CSS. And we really need to think about it, whether we really need to do this. We really need to use the CSS, or can we apply a style class and move the CSS styling to the style sheet instead? So it's really a trade-off. Okay, now let's look at the FASA pattern. As we can see in this figure, the FASA pattern is where an object provides a simpler interface to a large, probably with some more complex code subsystem. And the FASA can be frequently found across the jQuery library and makes methods both easier to use and understand, but also more readable. And the first example of FASA using the jQuery is Ajax example. We can see that the following are the FASA for the jQuery Ajax function, and we just need to call several parameters, and their syntax are quite similar. However, there are codes behind this FASA. There are a huge amount of complex code in their own right. And another interesting example of FASA using the jQuery is the animation example. And we can see the here is the let's look at the demo. It's more easier to explain this. Okay, the first example we just it's a simple use of the animate methods here, and it moves a div object element to the right until it has reached a left property of 250 px. So we can see it's a very simple coding stuff here. And then we want to define more attributes around more attributes of this animation, how this animation works. So we define not just the left, we also define the opacity change, the height, and also the whiles. So now let's see. Yeah. So the second one is little bit more complex. So we can see that the multiple multiple properties can be animated at the same time. You may ask, is it possible to manipulate all CSS properties within the animate method? The answer is yes. So we can see that the animate is function is like it works like a FASA to this a lot of complex CSS properties. You can choose to just define some of them or just to define one of them. So the FASA it hides complex code, and it helps us. It provides a simpler public interface for us. And it also enhances security of our web application. It works well in combining with other design patterns. And there is no obvious disadvantage for using the FASA in jQuery. And now let's look at the composite design pattern. The composite design pattern describes a group of objects that can be treated in the same way a single instance of an object may be. In other words, implementing this pattern allows us to treat both individual objects and compositions in a uniform manner. So from this figure below, we can see that the component here, it declares the interface for objects in the composition, and the leaf here, it represents the leaf objects in the composition, and the leaf has no children. And the composite here, it represents branches in the composition. It maintains a collection of children components, and the composite defines behavior for components having children, and it also stores children components and implement children related operations in the component interface. So here is how the composite design pattern using jQuery, and how the jQuery treats individual objects and composition in a uniform way. And at first we can see that I want to add a class active to the single elements which name a single item here. And we can also do the same things to a collection of to a collection of elements which name div here. So let's look at a concrete example of it. And first of all, I want to add a class intro node, which I define here. The intro node will will change the color of the font and also the background color to the element I want to add this class to. And it makes the first sentence having the black font and yellow background color. When I click the button, it turns to this one. And then I also, and you must notice that here is a single element. It is the first element in the P collection, and P collection is here. So this is a method which executed to a single element, and then I want to do the same things to a collection, to the P collection. Instead of a single element, this is a collection, and we want to add this class to this collection, and then we can get a very similar result, but we have two elements in these collections. They both have blue font and yellow background. So in this way, we can find the syntax for using this add class in the jQuery are almost the same for single item, for single element or for collection. There are not too much difference. And the benefit of use this is quite obvious. We can call a single function on a top level and have it apply the same results to any or all of the nodes within the structure. And also, all the objects in the composition design are loosely coupled. And there is no need to keep objects in an array or separate variables. However, we cannot always tell whether we are dealing with a single item or multiple items. And also, the speed and performance of our site may be affected if the composite pattern grows beyond a certain size. Well, let's look at a proxy pattern. A proxy pattern is a surrogate or placeholder to provide access to an object. For example, the check is like the proxy for the real money in your bank account. The check provides an identical interface to the real money, and the check can be substituted for the real money in transaction or payment. So the check then is also responsible for access to the real money, because you need to bring your check to the ATM to get the money realizing in your bank account. Okay, here is an example how proxy works in jQuery, and how the proxy help us to refer to the real subject we want to. And here we are making use of a timer inside a click handler. And now we can see that we want to add a class active to the button object when we click it, and this keyword is referred to the button here. And then we want to add a delay before the active class is added by using send-time-out function. But we have made problem here because this keyword here, after we add a set-time-out function, this keyword here is doesn't refer to the button anymore. It refers to the window instead. So to solve this problem, we have to use the jQuery's proxy function. By using the proxy like this, we just put our main body of our code into the proxy, and then we also this parameter we are passing will tell the proxy that our DON element is the value we want this to refer to. Here is the button, not the window. So you can see that by using the proxy, we provide a delegation to the real object we want to refer to, while it also provided from undue complexity. And another benefit of using the proxy here is it can help us to optimize and maintaining faster sites. We can use a proxy pattern to provide a placeholder for more expensive objects that are yet to be loaded or which may never be loaded. And some disadvantages of this design pattern is there is a risk that proxy pattern can hide the life cycle and the state of a volatile resource from its client. And also the communication with a remote resource may be disguised by using the proxy. Okay, now let's look at the observer pattern. In the jQuery, the observer pattern also comes with a publish subscribe pattern, and a subject which works as a publisher keeps a list of its dependents, who are the subscribers. And once the subject's state change, or there may something happen in the subject, it will notify the dependents, who are the subscribers, and the subscribers will then do something according to this notification. So the jQuery actually comes with built-in support for publish subscribe like system, and which equals custom events. In current version of this library, access to this custom events was using on, trigger, and off function. So here we can see that by using the on is like to subscribe to the custom event here, and then by using the trigger is like to publish to the event handler here, and then off is like to subscribe it. And for some people who want to use the conventional naming of the observer pattern, here is also a wrapper. You can call the subscribe, unsubscribe, and publish function, which are matching to the on, trigger, and off. Well, now let's try some demo here. Now you can see that the on method here, you attach the event handlers myPara for the select element P, and once the trigger function, which is defined here, once the trigger function trigger the myPara event for the selected element P, you will pass the pass along parameters to the event handler, the myPara, and then the parameters are passed into the alert function here, because the on function will just receive the notification that, oh, there are some parameters passing to your function, and now the myPara is fired, and you can do something in your in the main body you define your function. So now let's see, when I click here, it's like I trigger this event handler, and then the message will just pop up. So now it's the sequence diagram of how the observer patterns works. And the observer, there could be multiple observers. They subscribe to the subject, and then once there is something happen, the subject will notify, and then it will update will call the update function in the observers, and they will do something accordingly. So the advantage of using observer is that it promotes loose coupling jQuery, and it allows us to follow the separation of concerns principle. If the code blocks are self-contained, they can just be used with little difficulty in your projects, and we can then subscribe to single events and not worry about what happens in each block. But the disadvantage is switching of a subscriber from one publisher to another one can be costly in terms of code, because in the jQuery you not only need to change the event handler's name, but you may also need to change the main body of your code, because you need to match to the publisher the parameters in the publisher. Okay, now let's look at the iterate pattern. The iterate pattern is a design pattern where iterators access the element of an aggregate object sequentially without needing to expose its underlying form. So the iterator encapsulates the internal structure of how the particular iteration occurs. So we don't need to know the details of iteration algorithm behind these iterators. Now here is the how we use the iterator in jQuery by using the each function. So you can use the each function to use the underlying code behind the each to iterate through a collection like John, Dave, Rick, Julian, or a collection Lee, without needing to see or understand the code working behind the scenes that is providing this capacity. Okay, so let us try a demo. Okay, here now we can see that we use the each function to the Lee collection, and Lee collection is defined here, which contain coffee, milk, and soda. Once we click the button, you will iterate through the lead connection by pumping out the message like here. So let's try it. Okay, now it's coffee, and then you lead next is milk, and next is soda. So just by using this easy function each, we can iterate through all these all the elements in the collection. Yeah, but you can also take a look at the amount of code that's behind the jQuery each function, and with the within the core library, and you can see there are a lot of for loop, and the code is complex. But for the end user, they don't need to know the whole things behind each function. We just need to call each and to set to define our parameters, to set some attributes. We can get a iteration. So the benefit is that we don't need to know the the inner working of the code providing the iterate functionality, and also reduce the for loop syntax across our code. It makes our code easier and cleaner. Okay, the last design pattern I'm going to talk about is strategy pattern. The strategy pattern is a pattern where a scribe may select a particular algorithm at runtime. And the purpose of this pattern is that it's able to provide a way to clearly define families of algorithms, encapsulate each as an object, and make them easily interchangeable. So how this works in jQuery, here is a function and toggle, and in this function you can define your multiple functions, and this toggle method can toggles among the function you define here, and it calls every other click. Whenever a match element is clicked, the first specific function is fired, and then click again, the second one is fired, and you click again, the third one is fired. So the default toggle function toggles between hide and show is about the visibility of the selected items. So you can see the code behind the toggle function. When the element is hidden, we just fire the show function, and if the element is shown, you just hire the hide function. So it's really a strategy design pattern behind this toggle function, because it allows for alternative algorithm to be used independently of the client internal to the function at the runtime. So let's try the demo of the how toggle works. So here we just use the default toggle function, and we don't need to write a lot of code to define how this works, and when the p element is hidden, and we call show, and we don't need to define that, and we just use the function in a very simple way. And then we can see this text now is visible for us. Once I click toggle, it hide, and we click the same things and it appear. So this toggle, this button, there are two functions behind it, and which one will be executed at the runtime is defined at is depending on its state. So now you can see the structure of the structure of the strategy design pattern here. The algorithm, which algorithm is going to be executed, is defined at the runtime. So the advantage of the strategy design pattern is that the code is very easy to read and very easy to maintain, and also you take advantage of open-close principles here. But the disadvantage is you may ending up creating a lot of unnecessary functions. Well, there are still some other design patterns using the jQuery, for example, module pattern, builder pattern, and prototype pattern. And here are some more, but because of the timing, I cannot tell all of them. So let's do a summary of our presentation. In our presentation, we have discussed what is jQuery and why it is so popular, because it provides us a very good library to use design pattern in the by methods and functions. And we also discussed frequently used design patterns in the jQuery by using a lot of examples and demos. And besides this, we discussed the disadvantage and advantage of design patterns and how we trade off when we're using them. So we can see that design patterns are embedded widely in many jQuery functions, providing us an easy way to use JavaScript to develop web application. But it doesn't replace JavaScript; it is still JavaScript code. By using a lot of embedded functions in the library, in this jQuery library, it makes us it provides an easy way to use the JavaScript to do our web application. And also, design patterns are not perfect solutions. We can see there are always some disadvantage to use some certain design patterns. So we need to think our situation and to pick out the most suitable design pattern for our problems. And we also can combine them to use them together to solve our problems. And here are the references I have used. Thank you very much, and this is all my presentation. I hope it is helpful for you to learn something about jQuery.